Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. Hope everybody's having a beautiful day. The sun is shining where I am, and I hope that you know that the sun is shining down on you. The world is full of miracles and unexpected twists and turns, and right when you find yourself in a predicament, the sun seems to creep through the clouds and shine on us today. So I have an incredible individual, a ray of sunlight, the one and only Richard Drew Snyder. Excuse me, Richard Drew Snyder. You may have caught him in a last podcast I did with the team at Moksha Journeys. He's doing some really incredible work. He's a mental health counselor, a psychedelic psychotherapist, certified psychedelic assisted therapy provider, a veteran in private practice, and he's providing counseling to those in the community who otherwise struggle to access mental health services. Drew, I'm stoked you're here today, my friend. How are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm doing really well.
Yeah, I think you should be doing well. What you're accomplishing with your practice and what's happening at Moksha is incredible. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, I'm kind of jumping in here with both feet, but maybe we can give people a little bit of background and why you're so excited about the way things are unfolding the way they are.
Yeah. Oh, well, that is a pretty broad question. Where to start? Well, I mean, I am incredibly passionate about how psychedelic can help with mental health, what they can do to help heal the underlying injury that resides in our body and our psyche, and give a different way of thinking about what has maybe happened in somebody's life. And the reason I'm so excited about all of that is because it personally happened for me. And in a time where I was really desperate for something to work for me. Yeah. So I guess, if you want to hear, I can go back, kind of give you the background of what led up to that point, if that's where we're at.
Like, there's this quote that I wrote down and I highlighted it. It's so amazing to me. And it's this: I embarked on a personal journey of growth and healing from the psychological and existential wounds of war from my past. Like, boom, that, can you just maybe start there? Like, that is such a beautiful, incredible insight. And I think it speaks volumes of the way you think, how you interact with people, the way you figured out how to solve that in your life is contagious, I think. And it helps. It's probably why you're so good at what you're doing. So maybe you can unpack that for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've always known that I wanted to help people in some way. Ever since I was young, I thought I want to be in some kind of career that makes an impact on people, helps people. I didn't quite know what that would be. When I was really little, I thought, like, I'm going to be a detective and solve crimes, or and I would so I got a corncob pipe, and I would walk around with a nice little, and I'd collect missing children posters and hope that one day I'd spot one of them. And, so it's always been a part of what I really wanted to do. And I did some humanitarian work overseas. I got married pretty young, and my wife and I lived in China with this minority people group up in the mountains for a little while, working with them and helping to document their culture and their language because it was dying out. And so it's always been something I really wanted to be a part of. But then we started having children, and I started to feel the pressures of providing for a family, and being a poor volunteer person overseas it wasn't quite cutting it. So I moved back, but that was during the crash of 2008. And I was just trying to get my feet under me and working a couple part-time jobs, and it wasn't going great. So I thought, well, what's another career that I could jump into that could provide for my family, that I could still make a difference and do something good? And I thought, well, and I've always wanted to serve my country. I want to make an impact that way and maybe help people. So I decided to join the Army, and I fought really hard for a job in the Army that I thought would make a big difference for people. And I I ended up getting this job. It's called a human intelligence collector, which is colloquially known as an interrogator, actually. And yeah, so I was trained in that, and some people might think automatically jump to like some movie scene that where somebody's being put through pain or something, and I assure everybody that there was nothing like that. But also, like I still had this drive to help people, to do good, to like make a difference, and so maybe I was a little naive and coming at it kind of like a Boy Scout, but I every time I sat down with somebody, I genuinely wanted to connect with them as a human being and understand them and understand their motivations, and to try to get at the core of what really drove them, and befriend them, and try to get them to open up to me that way. But there was another track that this job also took me in, which I was much more suited to me and my personality and what I wanted to do. And that was to go out into like the villages in Afghanistan and talk to people, like make friends with people, just, village elders and people who might know information about where the bombs are hiding, where the bad guys are. And I thought, okay, so I can really make a difference doing this. And I threw myself into it as hard as I could, to try to accomplish a mission in Afghanistan and to save lives. But through that, and really trying my hardest to do that, I was running up against politics and the military-industrial complex and the entrenched situation that was very complex in Afghanistan, and I saw a lot of tragedy. I saw a lot of pain, and despite my best efforts, there was people that died. There was people that were friends of mine that disappeared. It was very hard. And then on top of all of that, there was a lot of stress coming from my superiors, and in some instances, some things happened where I just felt like I was asked to really go out on a limb to really do something good, and I would do my best at that, and then no one would have my back in it if it was kind of everyone protecting the masses. And that led to a real, what I didn't realize at the time, but I now know, and I started experiencing real moral injury, just existential injury. And I really at that time started developing post-traumatic stress disorder, and it took a while for me to realize what was happening with that too. I was a wreck. I wasn't sleeping well, and I was I had, part of this was self-created. I had so much expectation for myself to really try to do something worthwhile and good. And part of it was just the system, but all of that stress, the constant adrenaline and cortisol just coursing through my body, I didn't realize how it was affecting me, my brain, my physiology. And then on a existential spiritual level, I was really suffering. So then, my career was kind of taking off in the Army. And I also did a tour in Central Africa, supporting special forces, looking for Joseph Kony. And I don't know if you've heard of that group. He had the LRA, and had a child army that he had
abducted all these kids, forcing them to fight, and horrible
things. And my job was to, like, if anyone came out of that group, if we found somebody or captured somebody, I would interview them. I would try to get them to tell me what it was. So I was hearing all these stories, these traumatic stories of these now adults, but as children, they had been forced to do terror, like kill their parents. They had been forced to, really do unspeakable, terrible things and live out in the bush. And I mean, many of them were HIV positive and just, just the unthinkable things.
Yeah.
And I just saw so much pain and suffering. It's really hard. So
Like you take that on. Like, how can you not live that part of that experience by living that experience?
Right.
I'm sorry, man.
Yeah. So so obviously, yeah, I had a lot to come to terms with and work through, and to understand, that just seeing all this human pain and suffering, and wanting to make some kind of impact, and often feeling like just whatever I was trying to do, it was just wasn't enough, or like I was blocked, by, again, like this military industrial complex. I felt like if you would just let me off the leash, I could go do something actually really good. But it was just so much red tape, and it was difficult. So after that, I think, again, I was really experiencing a lot of stress and mental health stuff, and I wasn't fun to be around with my family. Every little thing, when I remember, like, one of my kids dropped a fork at the dinner table one time and it clattered, and I, barked at him, and then realized, like, wow, like, it was just a fork, and I losing it, So I realized I really need to get some help. So I went and got some therapy and counseling and started getting medications, and then at that time I decided that I needed to get out of the military just for my own well-being and find myself, and through all of that job, I had done some therapy, or not therapy. I had been like a peer support kind of counselor to a lot of people, who would seek me out. And I knew that was something that I would, that I was drawn to, that other people maybe saw in me for whatever reason. So I thought I'll go finish school, and become a therapist. And, I was definitely the trope of, like, the wounded healer. Because I was dealing with my own stuff as I tried to go back to college, and I now have 4 kids, and just trying to make it. I had a part-time job for a little while, and but using my GI Bill and the VA support, which was helpful. They did their best, but I was on all these medications, like, and medications for the side effects of those medications, and all of it was helping me kind of get to a place where I was functional. I was settled enough to go to school, to be, with my family, but I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, and it was helping me function, but not healing the underlying wounds that were there. So I, was still really searching for what could help me heal this. And I do have a spiritual faith that I had kind of grew up with, and that I was a big part of, helping me have, like, some kind of existential anchor. But I still was definitely struggling a lot. And then I heard, while I was in school to become a counselor, I heard that there was research being done around how psychedelics could help with depression, help heal PTSD, that there was some studies that had been done. And so I started diving into it. And I was raised in a very conservative home, very, very, like, all drugs are bad.
Right.
So I had never dabbled in anything. I towed the line. I did everything my parents asked. And so I hadn't even tried, like, weed until until actually it was like legalized in Oregon after I was out of the military. I thought, maybe this could help with my anxiety, and I tried a little bit, and that was like the first time, like as an adult, that I tried some kind of mind altering substance. So this was very new territory for me, but I thought, I'm desperate, so I want to look at this research, and I dove into it, and I started reading books around it, and there's some great ones out there, and the one that convinced my wife was Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, and then she's like, you have to do this. But I was kind of already on that track and thinking that way, and that this is something I really should try. And so with a lot of intention and a lot of preparation and research behind it, I kind of did it in a way that I don't recommend for people. I did my first like 2 journeys were just, on my own, and thankfully they went really well. Again, I did a lot of preparation around it to get myself, in the right frame of mind for it. And I ended up having this incredible healing experience. I was able to connect with the divine in a way that I felt, this love, for me, for everything around me, and just seeing like how much maybe doesn't make sense on one aspect to me, on this level, but maybe on some higher levels there was things made a little more sense to me, and in this kind of existential way. And I had a lot of experiences through that were just they're kind of, difficult to put into words, but they showed me another way of being able to think and being able to feel. It showed me, what I experienced was that there is more than just this physical experience and plane that I see. It's not, this isn't the only thing, this suffering that I have encountered, like that there's so many other levels and layers that's possible to experience. And so I had titrated some of my medications so that I could have this experience, actually, because I knew, SSRIs can really block the psychedelic experience, especially with mushrooms. And so, but then after that, I was able to finish titrating off my medications, pretty much all of them, pretty quickly, and felt so much more stable and resourced and grounded to be able to continue the physical healing that still needed to happen. Cause I found out later that all that cortisol and adrenaline that runs through your brain when you're in that high state of stress for so long, it actually eats away at like your hippocampus. So, my memory was just, it was non-existent almost. It was pretty scary. It's gotten a lot better, but I still feel like I'm actually healing parts of my physiology. And but that moral injury, for me, this was the thing that really started to help me to come to terms with things, to help me to to see from a different perspective, and to let go of some things, and to experience that feeling of unity and love that I really needed reassurance around, because I had seen so much pain and devastation that I was questioning, everything. So, so that brings me to, I'm becoming a therapist, and I've just had these experiences of profound healing. And so I knew that I wanted to work as a therapist in with more existential meaning making type of approach. I read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which was really profound for me. It was really moving and helpful to kind of reframe like this existential struggle and around like making meaning out of something that is inherently maybe meaningless, but you have an opportunity to make meaning from it. So so I really kind of started to develop that as a framework for the therapy that I provide for people. Meanwhile, I knew that I would sit with some of my clients and I would see them stuck in a way that I had been stuck. And I knew that as helpful as therapy is, and as much as like I saw many of my clients improving, and there were some that I felt like they needed some additional help, something like what I had experienced to really like help them over that hump, to get them out of that default mode network, like thinking well-worn neural pathways of this way that, and break them out into like their whole brain experiencing something that they thought wasn't possible maybe. And so when Oregon started to petition for psychedelic therapy, well, it ended up not becoming psychedelic therapy. It was just a non-medical model of psilocybin use. But when they started to petition for this, I knew I had to be a part of it. And so I was part of that campaign, and to the best, that I could be, advocating for that and starting to talk about my experience of this, even though I had come from a very conservative community that was very opposed to psychedelics, and because of, the 60s and 70s when it was passed in Oregon, I was thrilled and knew I had to become so I sought out training in psychedelic therapy, and I went through the Integrative Psychiatry Institute, which is a phenomenal organization that really has a pretty holistic lens of a very clinical model, and looking at MDMA therapy, ketamine therapy, and psilocybin therapy. And it's like 3 months of each one, and really intensive. So I got a lot out of that, and through that, got certified as a psychedelic assisted therapist through them. And then I met Rose Jotima, and when we were starting to really advocate for psilocybin use in Jackson County, Oregon. So I was a part of the campaign with them and trying to make sure that we didn't veto that in our county, and we started working in Colorado when Colorado passed their community share program, because we could legally work there. And I do have some stories about like some of the therapeutic outcomes and breakthroughs that I saw and that I was a part of. Because I, also it kind of became known that I was in this work. And so there would be people, even before this was legalized in Oregon, there was people that were aware of how beneficial this could be, obtained their own stuff, and then asked me to like come in and, do some harm reduction, sitting work for them. Right. Like, so, yeah. So yeah, I have some interesting stories from that, but yeah, that's the overview of how I really started to get into this psychedelic assisted therapy.
And first off, thanks for sharing that. It goes a long way into describing not only who you are and the way you see the world, but I think it goes a long way in describing how the world works. And as I'm sitting here, like I almost tear up thinking about a child that goes through the tragedy of being kidnapped and forced to do horrendous things. And then you having that story transferred on to you. Hey, hold this, but hold all my brother's ones too. Because we're done. We can't hold it anymore. We're going to hold it forever, but now you hold it. But then you
Yeah.
take that and somehow through alchemy or some sort of divine transformation, you hold on to that long enough to turn it into a tool to extract pain from other people later in life. Like, it's like, oh, so that's why there's pain. So here, you hold this pain, Drew. I want you to hold the pain of all these people until you can't hold it anymore. And then figure out a way to use that in a way to extract the pain out of other people. It's so damn beautiful if it wasn't so tragic in a way. And like, that's after hearing your story, I understand a lot more about you and why you're so good at what you do, because you had to hold on to that for so long it almost destroyed you and your family. Like, that's the true meaning of Viktor Frankl's book, is holding on to something like that. Find the meaning. Nope, that's not it. Find the meaning. No, that's not it. You almost want to explode until you find the damn meaning in there, man. Like, thank you for being strong enough to not only do it, but find a way to help other people do it. Like, that's got to feel pretty good to get to that point, right?
Yeah. I think you're right that I had to do something with it. And I think that's the, sometimes, I hesitate to say that, like, I went through what I went through, or, the pain that I saw, like that I had to do that in order to become who I am. I don't know
Why do you
what
hesitate
comes.
to do that? Why?
I don't know. I hesitate because it may be true, but I hesitate because I think, like, sometimes what we go through is maybe inherently meaningless. And we have to come to terms with that. But what we can then do is say, how do I make meaning from that? And I think maybe that's where the alchemy comes in.
Yeah.
Where, sometimes bad things just happen and you can't say, like, well, that happened for a reason, like, you have to say, like, what reason can I make out of that to move on? Because I think, and it may be true. Maybe I hear different existential or spiritual theories about, like, maybe we beforehand, before living this life, decided to go through these things because of certain lessons we wanted to learn and take on, and maybe that's true, but I find the easiest way to, like, to reconcile this, because then you start getting into questions about, like, well, what kind of universe or what kind of God would the video cut out. Hopefully you can hear me.
Oh, cut out just a little bit there. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, but I think there may be ways to really to come to terms with that and reconcile that, but the easiest way I found to alchemize that pain is to say, what will I do to create meaning from this thing that feels inherently meaningless, and I have to do something with it. And so for me, it's I can relate now with people who've been through trauma, who've been through really painful things. I've been through it, and I've seen some of the worst of it, some of the worst of what humanity is capable of, and still connected with the human being, the soul that's in there. And yeah, so
It's beautiful. I'm reminded of the quote that the line of good and evil run through the heart of every man. And we would all be lying to ourselves if we said we weren't capable of great, horrific things. And to be in the presence of it, whether you're a intelligence officer, or you're a truck driver, or you're a nurse, we are confronted daily with this line of for lack of, we don't have the language to describe it. So we use words like good and evil, but it exists in all of us. And to see it manifest out there and realize you're a part of it,
Yeah.
like you have to do something to heal it. And like, otherwise, like that's what creates that existential stress and that anxiety and that depression is like, I am part of this. I am causing this. What can I do to fix it? And when you can begin to find that meaning, because I think you're right. I think it's simultaneously meaningless and the most meaningful thing possible. It's both and at the same time. And when you can find that meaning, all of a sudden you provide framework. When you make meaning, you become the ember that begins to grow bright for someone else to follow. And that is the magic that resides in all of us. When you can become that spark, when you can create meaning, then you can light a pathway for everybody else. And I think that's a lot of the work that Moksha is doing. But I think there's a certain specific divinity within you, Drew, that like, because of all that things, you had to go through that. Like, and I wouldn't hesitate to say it. You had to do that. That had to happen in order for you to have the education, the ability, and the willingness and the divinity to pull that out of other people. With who much is given, much is expected. And you may not think being given the burden of children on their last day of life is a gift, but damn it if it isn't. Like, look what you're done. Like, look what you're doing. Like that is the gift, man. And it's a weird way the world works, man. That's kind of far out there. But what do you think?
Oh yeah. I think you're right. I do. I agree with you. We're getting into like some serious, like mysteries of the universe here, but yeah, that I think that I had to go through those things in order to do what I really always knew that I wanted to do, and which was to help people. So, and now I can on a different level. Yeah, I can relate and understand. And as to the, everyone's experience is unique and different, but I can get it just through the lens of the pain that I've seen. Yeah. And then knowing, how I can be of service and how I can help others alchemize their trauma and their pain into something more beautiful. And, it feels like a very fulfilling mission, that I've been able to step into. And, I'm also, actually still working with the Integrative Psychiatry Institute. I'm now one of their lead facilitators, training cohorts of therapists and doctors and nurses that are coming through to become psychedelic assisted practitioners themselves. And so helping be a part of that is really meaningful. Helping, like the clients that I am helping through Moksha is really, really meaningful. I have a story. If you
Are you kidding me? Absolutely, man. Please.
So there was a couple that I was working with for a long time. They were working through a lot of pain and trauma from different things that had happened in their life. They had lost their house in a fire. They had been trying for like 12 years to get pregnant and couldn't, and they were coming to terms with that. They tried everything and it just was not working. So they always thought, we're supposed to be parents and now we're not. So what do our lives look like? And how do we step into like this life, that we have, and mourn what we, don't. And yeah, there was a lot of manifestations of that grief and that kind of the trauma that, that they were navigating. And so I had worked with them for a while, and finally it kind of became apparent like that there was some stuckness there and some like maybe some moral injury for them that I could help them move through. So they ended up deciding to do a journey with mushrooms, and they had me come in. So they ended up both journeying simultaneously, which has to be done very like carefully and intricately. And so we ended up deciding that she was going to take a little more, he was going to take less, so that they could still have an experience together, but he could be there to support her, because really she had more to work through and probably was going to have a bigger experience. And that's how it ended up unfolding. So, she like ended up really processing through so much pain and trauma and existential just angst and frustration at God, like, why was this her life? And at the end of it, they felt so reconnected to each other, to love, to the divine. They felt like they were themselves again, and they felt just ready to face like this new chapter in their life. And so, we continued to do integration afterward, and they were coming in and talking with me, and we're integrating their experience. And like a month-ish later, they came in and they said, so it turns out 5 days after we did that journey, we conceived and we're pregnant. After 12 years of trying everything, somehow this, and I had been, they came in at a moment where I was doubting, like, am I doing the right thing? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing with people? And they said this, and it was this miraculous thing that, like, it blew me away. I did not see this as a possible outcome of this by any means. But somehow the mushrooms had allowed them to open and heal enough, whether just emotionally and psychologically or physically, they were open enough to conceive and like have their dream come true of having a child. And now they come in and talk with me, and their son naps in my arms while they talk through stuff, and they say like I'm his godfather, because
the symbolism.
Yeah. And so that's I like telling that story, because it, just the magic of this is unfathomable. And I'm not saying like every couple who's trying to have a child, that this will cure them and they will be able to. For whatever reason, the things lined up to be able to have this happen for them. And it just goes to show like the healing power of working with this medicine.
Yeah. If you've tried everything, why wouldn't you try that? And I think it speaks to the power of connection and healing. I've been toying with this idea of, we as a society, at least in the West, we focus on illness and sickness, and these things are contagious and no one wants to be around it. But if that's true, if illness, like these things like the flu, are contagious, then why wouldn't healing be contagious? And wouldn't that explain the idea that happens when you get in a group, when you get in ceremony, when you start talking to people, everybody starts healing. We heal from the ground up the same way the mushrooms grow. And why wouldn't there be? If people can't have kids, it seems like they're not connecting on some level. And I'm not pretending to know what it is, but I am saying that if you have a spiritual, mystical journey together, you're connecting on a level that you haven't connected with in a long time. There's real connections that happen that way. And if you want to know the way people's relationships work, look at the way the plant root structure works. Look at the way mycelium grows together, because that's the way we grow together, regardless of what spiritual ideas you were brought up in. Like, there's so much beauty and truth in all of the scriptures. But I think it's safe to say that we can learn a lot from the environment. I think it was one of my favorite gospels is the Gospels of Thomas, where he speaks about, Doubting Thomas, they called him. And he was the only one to touch the wounds of Christ because he didn't believe. He had to see for himself. And I think to myself, so many of us that find ourselves broken, we're the people that are like, I have to see this for myself. I have to see the wounds to believe it. And that's us, man. We get broken because we're so stubborn and we have to see it. But when you do see it, you can no longer not believe because you saw it with your own eyes. And whether that's having a kid, whether that is, getting emotional when you see these miracles happen. The miracles are happening every day if you just open your eyes. And I think that the psilocybin, I think that the society we're building, I think that the work you're doing, the integration of you bringing nurses and doctors in to have these experiences are bringing back together the science and the spirituality of it. And it's so, I hesitate to use the word romantic only for a moment. It is romantic. It's beautiful. And it's something that we should be embracing, man. I love it. And I can't help but get emotional when I think about it too. I see it happening with parents who have children that are autistic having journeys and then going, oh my gosh, they start crying because they're like, I'm the one that's separating us. It makes me want to cry thinking about it. Like, get out of your own way just for a minute. And you spoke earlier about the divine nature of the experience. And so often we think divine as a man in the clouds, or we think divinity of this force that's greater than us. But maybe divinity could be described as getting to see the world in a way in which you've never seen it before. Because there is something so divine about that you just get out of your own way and you can see your life unfolding the same way a vine climbs up a tree and it knows to flower at a 47-degree angle on August 23rd at 3:27 p.m., probably 3:33 p.m., just to make it a better metaphor. But, it's weird how that can happen, right? I think that we're part of something bigger. And when you realize that, boom, watch out, because you realize you're part of something bigger than you can imagine. And you had to go through these things were necessary, man. I get emotional too, man. Thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah, no, thank you. I love that. It's beautiful. And I completely agree. And, I think about the more clinical model that we have around the therapeutic use of these is a very individual inward experience. And I do agree with that. I think that there's so much healing that can come from that inward experience. But I don't think it's the only way. And I think we also need to have communal group experiences as well that are more, like interactive and outward. And I've had some experiences with ayahuasca ceremony that's like this. And and that comes straight from lineages and traditions of just the community, the tribe coming together, and everybody together is kind of healing. And you're having your own experience, but the healing is in relationship as well. And the way that the Integrative Psychiatry Institute is having the practicum for these nurses and doctors, the cohorts that are coming through, is they actually have groups of 22 come in, and we split them in half. And so 10 to 12 are journeying together on one day, and the other half are like sitting for them. And then they switch, and the next day, the other half all journey together. And it's in a room that feels at first a little tight, and you're like, I don't know how 12 people on mushrooms are going to do in here, and we're all fairly, we all have been through our stuff, and we're all wounded healers. And so, everybody's working through their grief and their pain. And it's not always that way. Some people are just laughing hysterically, and there's this group synergy and synchronicity that starts happening sometimes even, before people come, but as they're paired with the person they're paired with, it's often, like the perfect person, even if maybe off the bat, they're like, I don't know if I'm going to, but it ends up being like this organism that evolves into like this healing experience for everybody. Mostly. And even sometimes the difficult or painful things that come up they're things that kind of needed to come up.
Yeah.
And that's, like the grist for the mill. That's the therapeutic thing. So yeah, this, I think within that group process and hearing everybody else's, like what their experience was, what they were going through, it amplifies what you just experienced and what you had. And so I think we need both of these things like this. We need to be able to have the opportunity to go in with maybe, headphones and eye shades, so we can have a very just like releasing of our ego and just riding the waves of consciousness. And then there's also something to be said for this group experience and in healing and having that contagious healing, like you were saying.
I love that. So this brings me to the idea of fragmentation, propaganda, and like mass sort of delirium. When we look at the society we live in, it seems that so much of marketing is based on momentum. So much of marketing, so much of the world we live in is trying to get people to see a narrative in a certain way. And when you do that, there's a great book. I usually have it right in front of me. Of course, the day I want to show it in front of me. Actually, I do have it right here. Right here. Everybody should check out this book. It's by Edward Bernays, and it's called Propaganda. And basically what this book is it's a way in which people can get people to think certain things. But what does that mean? If I want you in this group to think a certain set of things, then I have to sync up my brainwaves to your brainwaves. I got to get the cosines. I got to get all the signs going together. And then we move in a coordinated effort. That can be done through an authoritarian system. In a lot of ways with modern media and, so much, I think, of our mental illness is just this fragmentation of everyone going all these different crazy ways. But I think what's happening in those group ceremonies is that there is a syncing up of the way we're thinking. You had mentioned, isn't it interesting that the people that they get matched up with, like this person will never fit, like their waves are probably like just, they're one's high, one's low, or they're just hitting each other. But what happens when we get on the same wavelength? There's all these metaphors in our language. Hey, let's get on the same page. Let's get on the same wavelength. And might that be what's happening in these ceremonies? And might we become an instrument for healing? We may become an instrument for anything in those areas, but it seems it's a natural progression for the human condition to get in sync with one another. And when that sync is happening on a level that is beneficial for humanity, we do become that instrument of healing. We've been so fragmented and so divided for so long. And I really think that's a big part of what the mushrooms and these different entheogens and plant medicines are doing, is that they are bringing us back in sync and in alignment with what's right for us and helping us make sense of these past tragedies. And maybe you could speak a little bit more. I don't know. I've never done or been in a ceremony with multiple people when that happened. What is that like while maybe you could be on mushrooms, and what is it like seeing it not being on mushrooms? Or maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah. Well, at this last group that I just helped to facilitate, we build a container of intention with everyone, and of safety, and to the best of our ability, and everybody, I think there is kind of like a coming together, and everybody is starting to get more on the same wavelength, and we really try to make it a sacred intention, and to bring in the sacred as much as we can, and to navigate doing that in a way that it isn't pulling too much from one tradition or another, because we want to be pretty inclusive of everyone. So, and but I think we're doing that well, and we're bringing in the sacred, and then what unfolds ends up being, sometimes I'm questioning it. Like, again, at this last one, there was somebody who was just laughing hysterically and couldn't stop. And he was just like, he was like mad that he couldn't stop laughing. And he was like, I'm going to be in so much pain tomorrow. And I kind of was thinking, like, I'm worried that this is disruptive, and he was trying to restrain himself, because he knew, like, it was so intense, but like he just had this laughter that was just like, it's just from the belly. And And I was worried that other people weren't able to go inward enough because they kind of kept getting pulled out by him. But it was contagious. Other people would start laughing in the room, and it would just start echoing, you know, and so there'd be these waves of laughter through the whole room that would happen. And then, you know, and then he would try really hard to go back in, and he'd be holding a pillow over his face, and I could just see his body, you know, moving. And then so later we talk about it at, you know, at the end of the day, we're talking about what everybody's experience was. And it was incredible to see how integral that was for so many other people's journeys in the room, that his laughter helped them heal certain things that they were going through, that what the group experience of that was something that was so additive and so like, it was so beautiful, and people were there was people that pulled different meaning from it for their own journey, but it was just this collective experience of like what people needed was happening, and he was helping to provide that. And so had I gone over there and like shut it down, you know, or like pulled them out, you know, it would have been a loss. And so trusting that there is something happening on a collective unconscious level that really needs to happen, where we're all helping each other heal.
It's profound. It makes me think like you can see that as fractal. Like if we can draw from that particular ceremony that his laughter, while seemingly disruptive to you and I or other people, actually was the thing that was needed for other people to heal.
Yeah.
Might that be a good way for us to look at our lives? Hey, this person over here that's really annoying me, maybe it's necessary. Maybe that person tried to tell me what's wrong with me. Maybe this thing I don't like in them is the thing I need to work on. You know, like, it's like, oh, in some ways, I think we're beginning to communicate for the first time in a long time. Like that's what this healing is like, oh, I understand. You're in pain. That's why you're acting that way. Oh my God, I didn't know. George, I just thought you were an asshole. I didn't know you were in pain, George, you know? But like, wait, and then all of a sudden I can feel good because like, oh, I am. Thank you for noticing. You know, I was going about it the wrong way. I was being mean to try to tell you I was in pain. That's a dumb way to do it. You know, and it's like this understanding that we're beginning to have some compassion for each other. And on some levels, I think that the world speaks to us through us. And I think that we share this idea, and so many of us in this space, that what's happening is nothing short of a miracle. If people are paying attention, you're seeing these things heal like in real time. And it's so inspiring and it's emotional. And I hope that more people begin to become infected with this idea of healing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we need it. We need it. This makes me think of something. I'm not 100% sure if how much I can share, but I just yesterday was sent like a proposal that's being floated out there about bringing together climate scientists and climate advocates and having them journey in a group to come up with creative solutions for like how we can like better protect and heal the world. So just, you know, like that makes me think of that. And I think there's so many other contexts where this could be so helpful. I do a lot of couples work. It's actually one of my fortes is working with couples. I love it. And I've been trained in the psychobiological approach to couple therapy, PACT by Stan Tatkin. And if anyone out there wants to hear some amazing books on couples work and how to get along with your partner, stuff by Stan Tatkin is like what I really has helped in my relationship immensely. And I think that it's going to work perfectly with psychedelics, that approach to couple therapy. And There's an audiobook out there by Stan Tatkin called Your Brain on Love. And that's one of my favorites if people want to look that up. But so I think and more studies are starting to be done. There's one being done, I think, at the VA with couples where there's one person who has PTSD, but they're bringing in the couple to work through stuff together, and they're using MDMA and having a lot of success. And I also have seen how helpful it can be to have your defenses come down a little bit and have just be a little more open and being able to connect with your partner, and heal things and see each other without all of the defenses and the walls up, and without your amygdala firing off, that you're in danger somehow because of attachment issues. And so there's just so much healing that can happen from this in so many different areas. And I think we can get really creative, and I'm so excited for like what the future holds as we really find the niches for this, and with using different medicines for different things.
Yeah, I think it has when the walls of the old regime crumble down, we are left to imagine what is possible. And I think that is what's happening. Like, we have a real opportunity to reimagine and reestablish relationships, what it means for our future, what it means for the kapuna, what it means for what it means to be a bridge between the older and the younger generation. And I see it happening in real time. Like I see people coming together for the first time in a long time. And there's that old saying that says, whether through inspiration or desperation, that's when change is made. It just depends on how you want to get there. Drew, we almost hit like an hour. Like, I felt like we just barely scratched the surface, man. I know how you doing on time? You got another appointment coming up, or?
Sure. No, I can flex. So if you got another question or something, then you hit me. We'll.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go out. This is just me speculating here. And like, as you're speaking about this, and this may be a little far out there, but I'm going to throw it out here and just see what people think. When I think about ceremonies, I think about symbolism. And one of my favorite symbols is like the yin and the yang symbol. It's like this paisley, right? And it's in motion. It's like the spot of chaos and order. And there's this black spot and this white paisley. And I think it would be an incredible ceremonial type setting. If this is going to sound crazy, but I think it would be beautiful. What if that was the ceremony? Like, was that people, you stand in the form of that paisley. Like, maybe people wear dark colors, and then they have a white robe person in the middle of that dot. Maybe that person is on MDMA, while everybody in the black paisley that's dressed in the black is on mushrooms. And then there's a white paisley, and then that person, like, it could be the two people that dislike each other the most. Maybe world leaders. Maybe it's Joe Biden and Putin, and they're both on like MDMA in the middle of the paisleys, and they're moving. I know I'm kind of rambling, but what I'm trying to say is I think there's a place for symbolic gesture inside the ceremony. What do you think?
Absolutely. Oh man.
That was out there. I'm sorry. I can't help it. Like, that's where my mind goes.
I would agree completely that ceremony, the more kind of symbolism that you can bring into ceremony,
Yes.
the deeper it can be, the deeper it can go, and you can really embody that even. And in some ways, we actually are doing this in these groups at IPI. We have everybody before the journey. We have all the journeyers come together in a circle. All the sitters stand around, and they all hold hands, and all the sitters come around them and put a hand on everybody's shoulder, so they feel the support and the containment and the safety that's around them. And then we have the licensed facilitators standing outside of that circle saying, like, we're holding you, we've got this. And we all, like, we set an intention together. We speak to the sacredness of what we're embarking on. We honor the lineages that have cultivated these medicines for eons. And we try to, like, bring in as much symbolism as we can, but that's such a beautiful example. I'm thinking about like the yin yang symbol and like,
right?
and how deep that is, how deep that goes. And
The climate scientists, right? Like those two people are at odds, but if they could symbolically be in opposite sides of the yin yang symbol, they could see it, they could feel it. And if we introduce plant medicines or MDMA or a combination of both, and you have both groups aligned in that paisley, like you are a manifestation of order and chaos, and you're communicating on so many levels, you cannot help but thoroughly understand the problem, that you're both part of it. You're the solution and the problem, and so are they. It's like, how can you not come to an agreement after that? It's like, oh, we're one thing. We are one thing fighting itself. What the hell are we doing? Of course, we're not getting anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I just saw something. I didn't look deeply into it, but I just saw that like scientists were able to take a photo of some kind of particle, and it was basically, it looked exactly like the yin yang symbol. And it was, yeah, like they were able to, it was I can't remember what kind of particle it was, but it was incredible to see it happening in nature, like that this exists. Like it's not, so many levels to this, but I think we need more ceremony and more the thing with symbolism is that it conveys so much meaning. A picture has 1,000 words. I am totally botching that. I can't remember how that goes, but I think we need more ceremony in our culture to bring us together, to have this shared experience and to see the humanity in each other, because we are so polarized, but also to see like the beauty of like that we need like the yin and the yang. We need like to find the best out of maybe our differences, and we don't all have to be exactly the same. We are the same in it, but there's beauty in our difference, and how do we honor that and bring it together? And I think the way to explore that is through symbolism, through ceremony.
It's the ineffable. It's the language that we have forgotten. It's the Tower of Babel. It is this idea that the Eleusinian mysteries tried to convey. It's this idea that a homeless person and the Roman emperor could sit side by side in ceremony and experience the tragedy of a person losing their daughter. And in doing so, the humanity between them is just that. They're the same, even though their stations in life are different. And that's what we're missing is this idea of relationship. And that's what ceremonies and I think it was Terence McKenna who spoke about an archaic revival. And I think that is what ceremonies and rites of passage and rituals, they've been lacking for so long. People are so thirsty for it, and so much of symbolism feeds into it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I'm trying to think of how I can cultivate more of that in my life, and I want to have more of that for my kids, and I'd love for my son to be, in some kind of coming of age ceremony that has symbolism and meaning to it, that's communal, that other men are a part of, and just things like that. It's I think it'd be so meaningful to have that.
Yeah. And Huxley's book The Island speaks about, obviously he wrote Brave. So here's something interesting that I was speaking with Dr. Erica Dick about, and we were talking about the relationship between psychedelics and eugenics, where they kind of arise at the same time, and they're kind of like it's kind of like this weird relationship. But on some level, it seems like we as a species are trying to find a balance about what's right, and when we suppress that, we go down some dark corners. And I think you can see this relationship and these two avenues kind of diverge in two books. One of is Brave New World by Huxley. Another one is The Island by Huxley. And in Brave New World, he talks about a world in which we can use disassociatives to be a very progressive, a very productive, a very sterile, a very predictable progression forward. And then in his book, The Island, he speaks about perhaps there's a more valuable way to move forward. And I bring up this because I think that a ceremony for a young adult, a psychedelic ceremony where a young adult begins to learn that there's a lot more going on in this world than just a rush from the hospital to the graveyard. That there's a lot more that is stranger than you, not only stranger than you imagine, but stranger than you can imagine. And when you give a child that understanding of the world, as you liberate them to create a world that's worth living in. And that is what I want my daughter to be in. And I think there's something to be said for a rite of passage. Maybe, I don't know the age, maybe it's 12, maybe it's 14. I don't know. But in my mind, I'm reminded of Huxley's book where a young child goes with their mentors to this church on a mountain, and they overlook this vista, and they're read the divine rights. This is what the world is. It's a masterpiece. What are you going to do? What are your gifts? If we had a world like that, I think that the possibilities could be endless, and I think it could be so much more freeing and tying together. But I crave that rite of passage for my child too.
Yeah. I 100%. I love the way you put that. Because it's so beautiful to think like of what could be possible when you experience what entheogens can show you, that there is so much more that you can create or experience, and what would our world look like if I wish I had experienced this as a very young man, just to help me through some of my existential angst and finding my place. And I mean, sometimes it brings up more questions than it answers in some ways, but I think that we're hungry to know that there is more beyond just like this very physical rat race of an existence. And I think there's studies coming out right now showing, that these generations are the most disconnected, like depressed generations, because they feel so isolated, even though they're the most technologically connected, still feeling so isolated. And I can't think of a better, antidote to that lack of connection than coming together in ceremony and sharing these ineffable experiences.
Yeah. I think it's happening. It's happening through the work that you're doing and through so many people that both of us talk to probably on a daily basis. We're real fortunate to get to be on the leading edge, or we, for some reason, we tend to have really good seats right now. And I'm super thankful for that. I don't know how I got this seat, but I'm super thankful that I get to be here watching this happen and doing a part, getting a role to walk on part in the war. And it's so amazing to me, because I do think this next generation, if they're able to harness this power of connectivity, they're able to create communities through the computer with like-minded people across the globe. If we can introduce ceremony into that, if we can introduce real connection, if we can see this and leverage AI and all these things as tools like they are, we can really do a lot of healing throughout the world. And I think a lot of that, unfortunately, comes through confrontation of, much like some of the stories you were telling earlier, like you have to confront these things. If you continue to take the Western style diet and the Western medicine, it'll give you enough to cope, but it will never help you confront. It'll give you what you need in order to make it one more day at a place you hate, being a person you don't want to be. It'll help you do that. But that is dying. That is slowly killing yourself. Why not stop and face that thing that is scaring you, that thing that's chasing you? Just stop and turn around. How long can you stand before it gets you? What is it going to get? Is it a mile? Is it 10 feet? You let it get right in front of your face? Are you going to talk to it? Are you going to shake its hand? What are you going to do? Like, let's see what you can do. I think sometimes just standing up to the fear scares that fear away, or it integrates it, right? Like maybe it's integrating the fear. What do you think it is?
I think it's all of that. I think we do have to confront, and that's
Yeah.
the only way, like we were talking earlier, of alchemizing. That's we have to, I've heard this thing of, if you are in a psychedelic journey and something scary comes up to you, and often this is something that is a
Yeah.
part of your own psyche that you're afraid
Sure.
of. But if something is coming, you can say, like, what do I have to learn from you? Or what about you serves my highest good? If you can ask this thing that's really scaring you, like, usually it'll then transform into something that then makes sense to you. It then isn't this scary thing anymore. It's there to, it actually is serving you. And I think that's what we have to do with these painful things in our life and the trauma that we've been through, or whatever it is. We have to confront it. We have to, like, say, what am I going to create from this that's meaningful going forward, and not just be
Yeah.
victim to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's the change that's happening. And maybe when you do it and you're like the same way, like when I was, which one do I want to go? When, as a young kid, I was molested. And so, like, I know the signs of that. So I can kind of see, or at least I think I can see signs of that when it happens to other people. And that same sort of education that's taught in trauma. It's like a trauma-based education that you learn when you go through an experience. Maybe you just call it lived experience. So if that's true, if people that go through these traumas can recognize those traumas in other people, pretty soon you begin to see that pattern on a bigger level. Oh, it's not that this person was malicious. They were probably abused. Oh, they were probably abused. And you see that pattern, but then you go, oh, the world is abusing people. It's not just this person. It's the society that's abusing people. Oh, these are symptoms. This
Yeah.
anorexia, this sexual abuse, violence, the use. These are all symptoms of a condition that we're all in the midst of, and they're just emerging. People are symptomatic of a bigger problem. And so when you see it from that angle, it really helps to alleviate the anger, the blaming. It helps to alleviate that, at least long enough to realize it's not just you, it's everybody. And that's that space you need to catch a breath. Okay, we're going back under. You know what I mean? But like, at least you can catch your breath for a minute. Like, oh, it's way bigger than me. Okay, well, what
Yeah.
can I do to help them? That's enough to maybe put that fear in perspective. Like, you don't have to run from the fear because it's not coming for you. It's showing you it's the world. And when enough people stand up to that fear, all of a sudden we have a team around us now. And it's not like we're walking alone anymore. Now we're walking hand in hand. And I think that's a big part of what the medicine is doing. That's a big part of what this healing is doing. It's people finding each other who are broken, holding hands, and we're like, get behind us. Let's go. We're going to walk forward now. You know, it's kind of beautiful when you think about it like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm so grateful for the community that is growing up around this, and the support that's there to face like these huge systemic issues, and that sometimes can feel really hopeless. But I have seen, like, how much these altered states of consciousness can provide, a different perspective, a different way of like, and even sometimes answers, because we're connecting to a part of ourselves. We're opening up to maybe our higher intelligence, and getting answers or perspectives that we weren't able to get before doing that. And so I have a lot of hope for some of those, really big issues. I mean, there's a lot of healing that needs to happen in the world, to start making some headway on all these symptoms that are happening out there. But I have hope.
Yeah. I often feel like in these heightened states of awareness, like, truths are revealed to us. It's not necessarily that you go to school and you learn, while you can do that, but it seems like the real lessons in life are revealed to you in certain states or certain events. Like, that's when you get to learn. Like, it's almost like something has to develop inside of you. And it makes me incredibly hopeful as well to see these things that are developing inside of people, and knowing that the next generation will have even something more significant develop inside them. It's almost like, maybe the first sort of flush of the mushrooms is a certain type of way, but then the next flush is a different type of way, and it's interesting to see, or maybe speculate on what the next fruit may hold. But I do see it as this process evolving. And for a long time, there was this meme going around that winter is here, but I think spring is upon us. I really see so much progress, and I see so many people confronting these things that scare them. I see people having and inviting real change into their life, and it's working out for them. The people that are taking chances that they're going to listen to this voice inside of them. Hey, I'm going to listen to my heart. This is really scary, but I think I'm going to just try to be the most authentic version of myself and see how that works out.
Yeah.
Guess what? It pays off. Who knew? It's scary though. Why is it so scary, do you think, to do that?
Well, we're conditioned to protect ourselves. We've spent a lifetime of various years building up ways to try to not feel pain, and taking risks can be painful. And sometimes, like, depending on your personality, there might be nothing that feels more painful than being ostracized from the herd, standing out as different, or being told that you're not acceptable, or whatever it is. And I think that then what these medicines and entheogens can do is to help you see that you are so much more than that, or that perception. You're so much more than even just this body, this mindset, this brain. Like, I hear so many people, when they're in their medicine, they realize they have to go to the bathroom. They're like, oh, time to take care of this body. And they start differentiating their consciousness from, like, the experience of this physical body. And I love to see that start to, like, people start to see themselves that way, as like, I'm so much more than just, this ego identity that has been built up since childhood based on all of my conditioning and experiences and defense mechanisms and everything else. And I think that gives us the strength to really, like, step out and be courageous, as we realize, like, I'm so much more than just that. And I don't have to rely on, like, the people saying, like, oh, you're a great whatever, you are, like, because now on a more visceral level that you're more than that.
I've said that myself, and, like, in some pretty dark times, I've come to that realization, and be it a heightened state of awareness, or a friend, or Moby Dick, or Carl Jung, wherever you find that inspiration, like, I'm so much more than that. Gosh, it's such a beautiful statement to think about. And it can provide you with the necessary catalyst to just take that one next step. Like, think about it. Like, is there something in your life where you're like, you know what? I'm so much better than that. Like, just saying that puts you in the right frame of mind to understand how much you really are. Like, you really are so much more than that. Like, wherever you're at right now, whatever you're doing, and especially if you find yourself in some dark spots, just use that as a mantra. Like, I'm so much more than this. And when you start asking that question, and when you start saying that out loud, you start seeing it. You start seeing it in everything around you, and the environment unfolds. And I never thought about it, but you're right. I think that is what's happening. We are understanding collectively on some level, whether it's springtime, or whether it's something that's happening collectively throughout the world, or maybe it's the migration of the magnetic North Pole. I don't know, but it's this awareness about us that we're more than that. We're more than this.
Yeah. I think that's so key. There's a divine essence in us that, that we can embody more. And we don't have to be just identified with this ego identity that has formed. And you it's hard to put that into words, but when you experience it, which a lot of people do, and with these mind altering substances, you can feel it, you see it. So, and I think that's transformational.
It is transformational. I got a question that kind of burns in me sometimes, and it's that obviously you and I and so many of the people we know, we're such advocates for this particular heightened states of awareness. But the truth is there's a lot of people that will never ever touch them. They'll never ever use them. And a lot of the times, like I could just go down this idea of like, what if everybody could have this experience? But maybe it's not for everybody. Maybe it's for a handful of people. I don't know what's right or what's wrong, but you have any thoughts on that? It's kind of an interesting concept to think about, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say it's not for everyone. I wish it was. But it's not the only thing that can provide that altered state of consciousness.
Yeah.
There's breath work. There's certain types of meditation, and some things take a little more effort, a little more like practice. But I actually think that there's a danger of relying too much on the psychedelics, and because they can give you a window, a glimpse of all these things that are possible, but to really go through your daily life embodying those, you can't just be high every minute to really be experiencing this. I think these are a beautiful medicine, but you don't take medicine all the time. You have to integrate that, and I really believe that then means like, what do I change about my life? And there's going to be people who they're not able to take these medicines, or they are afraid to take them, but you can still experience an altered state of consciousness, and experience like this disidentifying with the ego and finding that divine spark within you, and feeling how connected that is to everything through other practices. And really that's the goal anyway. It's the goal to really to be more that way. And I think that there's sometimes a danger to over rely on the psychedelics. So I've had a profound experience with breath work. So I know from experience that it's possible, and it is something I'm trying to cultivate in my own life, so that I can access that at any time I want and get a release of DMT from my pineal gland on demand. That would be nice.
That would be on demand. There's another sort of like prickly area that comes about accessibility. And in your private practice, you're looking for ways in which to find people who otherwise can't find treatment. It's interesting that psychedelics they're relatively easy to cultivate, but sometimes the process of getting people through treatment is expensive. Like, is there bridges we could find to mitigate that?
Yeah. No, that's a huge topic right now, and a very relevant one. There's many people, because I've worked in populations that really, can barely afford, like $20 therapy sessions or whatever. And I really care for these people, and I know they wouldn't be able to afford like most of the services that are out there right now of psychedelic therapy, because it's not necessarily the cost of the medicine, it's the cost of having, a practitioner or two ideally sitting with you all day long. There's a lot of time and expertise that you're paying for. So yeah, accessibility is a huge issue. And of course, like navigating this in the legal framework adds a lot more additional costs. The best kind of answer that I'm working with right now is that the people that can really afford it, they pay a lot, and then that subsidizes the people that really can't afford it, and who, and there's like either scholarship options or even, volunteer work, and that is the way that people who need to have this kind of healing but can't access it financially, at least, like get the opportunity to.
Yeah, it's so fascinating in some level to see, when I look at the pharmaceutical model, or even like the some of the laws that are put in place. A lot of the times when we think of high-powered attorneys or pharma executives, we think of people that are really wealthy. And it turns out that their children usually need this therapy more than anything, And so in some ways, like, they're creating this incredibly high-priced model that their kids are going to have to use, and like, maybe we could pan that out a little bit and be like, look, we're kind of creating this model that we all have to use. I haven't thought about it a whole lot, but I'm gonna have to rethink that through, because I think there's probably some nuggets in there. But yeah, I do think that the accessibility part is, and I think there's avenues for people to explore. There's always, while the underground is definitely has some pitfalls and some holes in it, there's really, really good people that have been underground for a really long time that know what they're doing and make their services accessible to people. I'm not saying that everybody should go find some underground place, but the people that work in the underground are some of the unsung heroes that have made today possible. And
It's true.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's, real risk in taking that, and they're stepping out in ways that, based on how much they believe in this and how much they know that it can be healing. And of course, like, yeah, you're right. There are some pitfalls of, like, once in a while that you might come across somebody who shouldn't be, operating at all. And there is a process, and, to really, like, but so I think that the community is trying to really police itself right now to make sure those people aren't out there. So you have to use discretion and be careful, but I'd say the vast majority are people that, they're doing this because they're really called to it and have been, and they're doing it for the right reasons. And thus they're providing usually, like, services and in a way that is more accessible.
In some ways, I think I was thinking about this yesterday. In some ways, I feel as if this particular wave of entheogens and psychedelics is a lot like the late 50s. And there's all this promise and there's all this research going on. And, like, there's so many people that are really excited about it. And I'm like, wow, that's so cool. Like, we're going to be alive at this point in time. And then I started thinking, like, oh, but what comes when the wave breaks? And then, like, there's a real possibility. Like, I don't know if Linkletter's daughter jumped out of that window because she was on acid, or if there was a lot more going on. I don't know what was behind the Nixon administration, or I don't thoroughly know what the push was to try to put the genie back in the bottle. But if past relevant behavior is the best predictor of future behavior, then there's a real possibility that we could see the inability to centralize, to wrap laws around and monetize this could force the powers that be to try to put it back into a bottle. And might that look like a new Manson family? Might that look like a new Jonestown? Like, there's a real possibility that something like that could happen, right? And that would come from the underground, and that would be grounds to put this thing back in the bottle. Is that a real possible scenario you think that could happen?
Oh, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about, like, that worst case scenario, but I think it is possible.
Sure.
And I think that you're right, that that's worth thinking about, because we don't want to create the circumstances for something like that. So I think it's better that it be in the open. It's better that it be I'm hopeful that that this will become more and more, that we've learned some lessons from the 60s when there was, like, this swing the other way. And that from this, we are being more careful and trying to self-regulate in such a way that, like, the people who are really afraid of this, like, have their fears assuaged, and they're not going to be trying to put anything back in the bottle. But there's a delicate balance there that I think we do have to be mindful of, and it is worth really like taking careful stock of. And yeah, but
Yeah.
the results of decades now of research and the stories that are out there of just how beneficial these things are, it's too much to not acknowledge. And so thankfully, I think things are shifting in the right direction.
Yeah. I bring it up because I fear the idea of, if you don't talk about something, then it's almost like you're afraid of it. But if you're willing to talk about it, it's like, yeah, this is right here in the open. Of course that could happen. Like, but what if it did? Then these things would happen. Look at all this research we have. Look at all this thing that's happening now. Yeah, things do happen, but we can't control that. But to deny the inevitability of a crisis happening, like, what the real crisis is that we don't have ibogaine in Kentucky yet. We will. But like the real crisis is that we don't have these medicines in the inner cities, and that it's not being subsidized by, what if we measure like, gross, like instead of the gross national product, we had like a gross happiness index, like how many people could we go get that are living under bridges right now and treat them and make them productive members of society, however you want to define that word productive. Maybe productive means being a better person. Maybe a productive person is someone who feels like they matter to society. Maybe a productive person is someone who is no longer afraid of being abused. But I think that is the real crisis, and that we're seeing these medicines emerge, not only in psychedelics, but in entheogens and the things that are happening in Kentucky. And I'm really hopeful for the future. I really see this new form of healthcare beginning to emerge, and not only emerge, but just excel on so many levels, right?
Yeah. And hopefully there will be the monetary incentive there too for healthcare organizations and insurance to see that like it's actually cheaper, probably it's in the long run, to pay for something like this. And instead of having to pay for someone to be on like all the medications that I was on for years, I have a few sessions, and the success rate is so much more in treating treatment resistant depression, PTSD, like all these things. I'm hopeful that there's going to be a shift in our healthcare and in all of this. So I think there's just reason to be excited with everything that's emerging from this movement. And
yeah, I think that there's a shift happening right now, Drew. And I think that so many people in this community, so many people in this LinkedIn community, so many people in Oregon and Denver and Kentucky, and so many people out there have had the experience they have had so that they can be on the front lines helping people right now. And I think you're one of those people. I'm super stoked to get to know you in a way that I didn't know a couple hours ago. You're an awesome person, man. And while I'm disheartened that all the tragedies that you went through were painful, on some level, I'm happy they happened to you, because I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you, and you wouldn't be helping so many people, man. And I love you, man. I'm super stoked that happened to you. And that may be a weird thing to say, but I'm sorry, but I'm also grateful.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm glad to have had the tools to like work through it, to alchemize it, to be able to heal those existential wounds, the moral injury, the existential crisis, and to and in many, many ways, I credit a divine presence that I'm aware of, that has helped to guide much of that. And so I'm grateful to be a part of it. I'm grateful that I can help share that, and hopefully there's people that will benefit from that, and from my experiences, my pain, that are going to also get healing, that are gonna, people, that there'll be a ripple effect, that the world will experience just being just that much better, hopefully, by, you know, um, our efforts to bring this to more people, in a ethical way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think
thanks
you
for
guys are
helping.
setting yeah, man. Like I said, I'm stoked to be here and see it. And I'm an advocate for it myself. I have been healed by psychedelics in so many ways and still am today. And it helps me thoroughly understand when I can't make sense of the world, and it gives me the ability to see myself and my situation in a way I never have before. And it's really hard sometimes to see it that way. It's painful, but it's helpful. And I think it makes me a better person to understand, and it provides empathy. And I hope that other people can get the healing they need and turn their traumas into a tool to help other people. Cause I think that that's the message of trauma. But man, you guys are on the leading edge. You guys are setting a really high bar, and I'm so excited to see what's happening in Oregon. So excited to see cool people out there making changes in the world, changing their life and changing other people's while they're doing it. And I'm excited for the future. Before I let you go, my friend, where can people find you? What do you have coming up, and what are you excited about?
Oh man. Well, there's Moksha Journeys website, and I'm helping with what they're doing in the recovery programs that are starting to take off, which I'm really excited about. I do have a LinkedIn page, and and I'm also working with the Integrative Psychiatry Institute. If
Right?
people are interested in becoming psychedelic assisted therapists, that's a really great option. They have phenomenal training with some of the best speakers. And the practicum experience, you'll probably see me in there if you wanted to do that. And
Yeah.
as far as like my own work that I'm doing, I'm paring down my private practice, so I still am maintaining one, but it's not like very open at the moment. As much as I'd like to take on everyone and help everyone, that's something I wrestle with. Always a little
Right.
overburdened. But at the moment, I'm trying to like limit myself, because there's so much happening with the psychedelic therapy space that I'm involved with. So, but I'm incredibly excited to finally have these things, taking off in the above ground legal
Yeah.
space, and to be a part of the leading edge of that. And I'm seeing some phenomenal things with it, and it's like just emerging. So it's wonderful to be a part of it.
Fantastic. Well, I'm super thankful for your time today, and I'm super thankful for everything. Ladies and gentlemen, go down to the show notes, check out Drew. Let's see where the links will take you. You will be excited about it. Thank you for joining us. That's all we got for today. Drew, hang on real briefly. I'm going to talk to you afterwards, but I'm going to end it with our friends here. Ladies and gentlemen, hello.